Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the chance. It is my pleasure to be here and to bring some of the insights about one of the existential risks that we are facing. That existential risk is related to how, as a humankind, we live in this world. And the second thing is, what is the implications from the high income aspiration for Vietnam. So the next 30 minutes, and I would like to touch upon the chapter on the climate change, that is in the chapter 16 of this book. That will deal with what is the impacts of the climate change and its implications to the resilient high-income economy of Vietnam. Then we will see what are the current strategies, policies, and approaches, the commitment and preparedness of Vietnam, whether it is enough or we need to do more. And the third part is how advanced economies like Japan is dealing with these uncertainties that comes with the climate risk. Then finally we will find some kind of a forward-looking pathways where Vietnam can do by itself and also do jointly with this international community and the advanced economies like Japan. I think this is the Vietnam wants to be a high-income country, and the threshold for becoming a high-income country is the set by World Bank is around $14,200 per capita. I think this graph is not clear, but if you look into these countries in the region, and in Japan could be able to become the high-income status after the Meiji era. Then Korea has did it within the 30-year span, within these strategic interventions. Now China is close to that. It all happened in 30-year span. So that means the economic growth need to be doubled. Yesterday we have been discussing about what are the opportunities and what could be the drivers of this economic restructuring and what type of new industries could drive Vietnam into a high-income country. We also found some of the risk that is associated with the geopolitical risk, and then inequality, there is a social inclusion that is we need to take into consideration. But often and we limit and one of the risks that is the climate and the natural disasters. Many of you know that is the Typhoon Yagi that came last month, and it affected 31 localities. Almost 40% of the population of Vietnam has been affected, and there is an unestimate, there is a crude estimate, there is 40% of the GDP may have been lost. If that kind of a typhoon of that magnitude happened 3 times in a year, how the aspirations of high income? So that is one of the risks that is we need to take into consideration. And we know that is in an average about 12 to 13 storms has been impacting on Vietnam. So there are some budget outlays that is coming from the national budget. There is also unprepared budget expenditure, that is the emergency, that is going into this resilience, building the resilience capacity. If you look into this harsh part of the climate change, the disasters, Vietnam is one of the mostly insecure countries. insecure in terms of water and food. Yesterday we had seen that is the how Vietnam has moved from the agrarian economy to the industrial economy. So this also comes with this urbanization, and if you combine together, and there is an estimated loss of about 4 to 8% in Vietnam by 2050. And if you expand, it is much more. There is no cost of is much more if you don't take any actions. So that is where that is the climate risk comes in. We estimated, and in coordination with the Esplanade, and we estimated, and the total damages that caused by the climate change has been increased to 12 point, around 13%. And the economic losses are estimated to be 56%. And it is impacting the around 17% of the people. So it has both the economic cost and also the social cost. And there is also passive impact that is estimated to be about 40%. This 40% is coming from the saltwater intrusion, that is the low-lying land areas has been polluted by the salt water. So these are the estimated, these are the real figures. That shows we are moving into a much more insecure world, and also the Vietnam. This is the one map that shows how the countries are prepared for that climate vulnerability. If you see, that is the Vietnam is somewhere located here. This is more vulnerable, but less ready for this adaptation or the resilience to tackle with these vulnerabilities. Only few countries like Brunei, Malaysia, Korea, and Japan are well prepared for adapting to this climate and the disaster risk. So there is a lot to learn from these countries, and also we need to reduce the vulnerability, and also we need to prepare for increasing their adaptive capacity. That is one of the major challenges that has to be translated into national development plans. If you look into this adaptive capacity of the countries, basically there are two main streams of adaptation. You know, there is our local communities are always adapt to changes. That is called autonomous adaptation. Most of the farming communities and even localities usually changes. That change is a kind of autonomous and accumulative. On the other hand, we do have adaptation which is planned by the government, planned there, inscribed into the national development plans and the sectoral action plans. If you look into this, the development that is happening, and most of these adaptations to the climate change are reactive. Whenever there is a disaster happens, we react to it, and it is mostly autonomous. But some part, like changing the crop rotation in the agriculture or the insurance schemes, they are planned adaptation measures where some efforts has been done by Vietnam. But one of these insurance mechanisms that is developed at the provincial level is one of the innovative one that can be a kind of a model for the rest of the ASEAN countries. But still long way to having 100% vulnerability. Here also there is an opportunity for the innovations, the digital innovations, or developing the early warning systems. I think today we are facing the typhoon, and this typhoon has been already predicted, and these predictions, this assessment could be transformed into an action plan by integrating this satellite data into the local networks, and also kind of an artificial intelligence and cloud-based analysis. So this kind of a framework, early warning framework, has been translated and transformed into an adaptation roadmaps at the sector level or at the local level, then we can build a much more resilient Vietnam. So there is opportunities that is available. There is a new type of digital technologies and the data sciences that can bring in. But if you look into this adaptation, the climate risk vulnerability, there is a continuous sum of actions. There are 100% benefit and see vulnerability reduction if you focus on it. And sometimes responding to the impacts, the benefits is zero. It is only the disaster resilience. So there is a wide spectrum of measures, like providing the farmers with the drought resilient varieties, or teaching the officials in collecting the climate data and translating to the roadmaps, or building the coastal zones, shelters and like a mangrove vegetation, and in constructing the new infrastructure. There is a structural measures and the non-structural measures. The structural measures are usually costly. So here we need to see there is how we can finance when there is uncertainty in meeting the benefits in the absence of the climate change. We need to deal. That is where the complexity comes in. So this complexities has been considered and it has been developed into the roadmap. This is a kind of overall framework of the national climate policy that is MONDE has developed in cooperation with the other sectors. Here you can see there is the two divisions. One is about the adaptation, reducing the vulnerability, and then developing a development resilience. Second thing is about the mitigation. Yesterday, my colleague Bien mentioned about the climate and also the circular economy benefits. And then Dr. Anbumozhi will be talking about the green energy. There is one part of it. But I would like to focus more on the adaptation. And if you look into this adaptation, there are concerns are already committed and already taken into consideration the National Development Plan through different strategies. Green growth strategy is one thing, and the socio-economic development strategy that already ingrained. But if you look into deep and zoom in on these strategies and the action plans, we do find uneven preparedness. We have the strategic plan and the roadmaps, but we are still struggling to develop what could be the key performance indicators for the climate change adaptation and the mitigation. It is not yet well defined in the sectoral action plans. So here we need to focus on it. Measurable and reportable and verified indicators. And then how this is fiscal expenditure. There is a structure that is coming from the budget outlays, and there should be a private sector mobilization that we don't have the plans yet. And there are some sectors like food sector and the water sector and the health that has the more impact. Still we don't have how to bring in this private sector. If you look into the insurance that is covered by the small and medium enterprises in Vietnam, it is less than 7%. Then how we can enhance the capacity and the capability of the banking sector and the non-financial commercial institutions. These are some of these issues. If you don't tackle it now, then it becomes a kind of a standard asset over a period of time. When we are by 2045, whatever that is investment that is we are making on the coastal zones will become a standard asset. So here that is some of the focus areas Vietnam need to consider. And if you look into this is the finance, where the cash flow, this is the latest estimate by the IMF. If you look into this adaptation compared to the mitigation, you can find a wide difference. The first difference is the cash flow that is happening in the adaptation side. This is mostly in millions. These are the $1 million. But on the other hand, if you look into the mitigation, we have the billions. particularly in the green energy sector. Second difference is, if you look into this, is the financing. If you look into the climate financing, there are three major variants. One is the public finance, that is coming from your taxes, from the budget outlays. There is other public finances that is coming from the multilateral development banks and the green climate finance mechanisms. Here, if you find, compared to this mitigation, and here the public finance is more here, and the private finance is less, and the gap, which is what is needed and what is flowing, is much more higher in the adaptation side. So this difference need to take into consideration how we can bring in the private finance to support building a climate resilience that need innovations. That need innovations from the policy side, that need financing modes or funding modes, that need innovations. Finally, there is also innovations needed for the at the international level, knowing that is the current framework, it is not working. There are several ways of innovations, and one thing, if you look into that Vietnam, and particularly there is a kind of a co-benefit approach. This is what we mapped in agriculture sector. Some of the actions, like carbon sequestration, that is the application of the circular economy in the agriculture sector, can bring the benefits to the farmers. They can mitigate, they can contribute for the climate change mitigation, but also they can build a resilient agriculture system. That will also help biodiversity and the flood regulations and the water quality. There are about 6 categories of activities. And EU has already quantified what could be the potential for these activities to transform into carbon credit. For example, the managing the peatlands and the agroforestry contribute about 235 ton of metric ton of the carbon dioxide. If you find a monetary value for this carbon dioxide, we can help the farmers in Vietnam to build a resilient agriculture system, resilient local communities. But that need much more innovations, and we need technological interventions. Countries like Vietnam and most of the ASEAN countries, they are the second movers in adopting the technologies. We don't innovate our own technologies. We adopt these technologies. How? So here we need to find what will be the advantages for us moving as a second mover in the case of the technological field. That need much more insight and much more actions towards the absorption of these technologies. So we also can learn from other countries. Coming to the disaster, Japan is the most vulnerable. This is more or less similar to Vietnam, and almost 75% of this land mass of Japan is mountainous. Only people living in about 30% of the area. It's similar to Vietnam. And they also sit in the alluvial soils. For example, the capital city Tokyo is built up on an alluvial plain, and its elevation is much more less than its sea level. This is similar to Da Nang or Ho Chi Minh City. But Japan, over a period of time, Japan became a country that is resilient. They could be able to build a resilient society and innovating some technologies and also providing the financial mechanisms and as well as the involvement of the community and sharing the risk. So that kind of best practices could be looked into it, that could be translated into a kind of an action plan. This is what Japan is doing in terms of the climate change adaptation. And it has the 3 pillars. One is promoting, identifying, then promoting the effective adaptation measures at the cross-sector level. That need a lot of research. Which measure will work in the short term, which will work in the long term, and what are the cost and benefits. That need a kind of a very focused research. Second is developing an information platform where every stakeholder can be a part of it. They can share the risk. They can share this information that is about the climate change and the disaster. So that is they can well prepare for it. The third one is that is how we can help these local areas. That is the kind of core DNA of climate risk management. How we can prepare the individuals and the local communities to adapt to the risk. Then it is later to build over that as a sector plans and the economic plan. And Japan's approach also has a component for the international actions, promote the international cooperation and the private sector investment. So this is what happened. I don't know why this figure is not coming up. Here you can see that is the upper side, that is how much this is the resources, the domestic resources Japan has spent from the year 1946 to it is 2000 available time. And it has been increasing, the budget outlay for building these quality infrastructure, climate resilient infrastructure, and then disaster early warning systems. So during this investment, and you can see there is the chapter 16 of our book, this graph is available, and you can look into it and you can see there is how the social losses, the damages has been reduced drastically over a period of 30 years period. So Japan provides a case how we can combine the technology, how we can combine that information, and how we can inform the domestic resource mobilization to support and build the climate resilient society. So the first thing is how we can mobilize the domestic resources. The government budget comes with our taxes. So whether we are willing to pay for the extra tax for making this climate resilient actions. We did a survey and we think about 20% of our survey respondents are coming from the Vietnam. And when we asked how much you are willing to pay an extra price for addressing the climate risk, people say they can afford and about $5 to $25. There is a maximum they can afford. What we need is a millions, but here there is a willingness to pay for addressing the climate risk. But what they want is they want better health and more investment in the green transition, and they are interested in seeing co-benefit for the extra dollar they are paying. It is not simply for the climate risk. It is about the co-benefit of the extra dollar they are willing to pay for. See, another way of mobilizing this finance is going to the private sector where most of the resources are available. But the thing is, it is not coming in the speed in which needed. Here there is a carbon markets, and the bond market is one of the new tool, and Vietnam has mobilized about $27 million through issuing the bonds. If you look into the figure, and Vietnam is one of the successful countries to mobilize the finance for the adaptation when compared to other ASEAN countries, where most of this finance, that is the bond market, is working for this mitigation. So most of the bonds that is issued are very project-based, the infrastructure oriented in the water sector and the agriculture sector. So there is a potential opportunities to look into it and to upscale it, where some other countries are already doing it. Another area where Vietnam can look into is the carbon markets. How the carbon market works, and there are different corporate level action that is needed to mitigate the net zero, but which is very hard to, which is very costly. So what they can do is companies, for example in Japan, they can invest in mitigation efforts here in Vietnam. And in turn, they can get the carbon credits and the financial support flies here. This is the basic principle, and there are different mechanism that is available in the terms of carbon market. One is the international, and CDM is one of the examples where Vietnam has already has developed projects, and the bilateral JCM and joint credit mechanism developed by Japan is also another one. And there is also domestic mechanism that is available within the ASEAN level, and also the voluntary carbon market. So there is several new avenues that has been developing, and this is one area that Vietnam can look into it. And if you look into this forestry sector, and which is basically a carbon sink, which has been not yet fully utilized. And if you look into this, is the carbon that is lying above the ground, particularly the forest canopies, which is estimated to be about 29 tons per hectare of basically virgin forest, a tropical forest that is available. And also below ground, there is a carbon sequestration that is available. It's estimated to be about 9 tons per hectare. And this is available. This is the average number that we calculated from the FAO. But still, we need to develop an inventory to support that is whether how much is the real potential exist. But there are some other countries that is they developed these voluntary markets. For example, New Zealand, and particularly using their forestry sector, and they developed 1.6 billion 2 years back. This 1.6 billion has been feed some part, not the whole is feed into the climate emergency fund. But there is a disaster occurs, and this fund could basically put able to the farmers and the local communities can have the access to this fund. So this is a kind of an innovative finance mechanism. Similar one also exists, and in Korea it is about 250 million is made in 2021, and this has been, some of them is recycled to develop the climate risk fund. And Singapore also put a price about 5 tons per hour, but we don't know how that funding mechanism works for the climate resilience. But there are some innovations that is happening to mobilize the private finance and how it can be recycled through the climate resilience. So basically our recommendations and coming from this chapter for Vietnam, by 2045, if you wanted to achieve the high income country status, probably there are 4 areas that need to be played. The first one is the agriculture and the forestry sector, and here there are a lot of subsidies are going into it, and probably we need to see that is how this subsidy system could be repurposed towards building climate resilient infrastructure. And also another offer is the digitalization of the agriculture, how the digital infrastructure could help the building the resilient agriculture through inbuilt early warning systems. Second thing is the quality of infrastructure, and that need a kind of real cost value, and what will be the total cost. So that is, we make sure that is our current infrastructure is not becoming a standard asset, and it become more resilient to absorb more shocks. That needs real cost, and we don't have that kind of information. We need to acknowledge it, and we need to develop a program to see that is how the future of this infrastructure become a climate and the disaster resilient. And third is also the manufacturing sector, and I think yesterday we have seen that is Dr. Ha is mentioning how this FDI is moving in and in very, very different locations, and see how we can develop a business continuity plan for this manufacturing sector. And most of, except a few multinational companies, most of the small and medium enterprises along the value chain doesn't have the business continuity plans. So, and also we need to see that if you see that is the FDI going in, and most of them are going into the coastal areas, knowing that is they are having a high risk, and here we need to find what will be the alternate locations for the new value chains, new factories. And the third one is the resilient coastal areas and the smart cities, and we know that is the Da Nang is a kind of second tier cities, who it can become a mega city, and if it is a smart city, and how this current vision of the smart city could be used to translate in the climate risk. So these are the four priority areas that will be identified and that would strengthen the National Development Plan, and these are coming from our consultation with Monterey and also Exponere. And this strategic action plan also contribute for the Japan and Vietnam cooperation. I think that is the last section of our chapter, and it sees that is how these four sectoral actions can be reflected in the new National Development Plan and the long-term work plan. That should be inclusive of local communities and the businesses. Mostly for developing or targeting, this is how the Japanese ODA and FDIs could be combined together and to feed into it. So this is my last slide on the message that is coming from the chapter, and basically if you look at about these innovation opportunities for the climate resilient Vietnam, which will also contribute for the high income aspirations, there are three areas that we need to consider. One is the climate information. The climate information needs to be strengthened. There is an area for the G2G cooperation. The Japanese government and the Vietnam government need to work together. How Japan government has already developed the transboundary information platform. That's how Vietnam can harness that potentials available. Second thing is the business to business. The carbon climate bonds and the carbon markets, how we can mobilize. And here it needs a very peculiar approach, and we need to study the entire ecosystem, how we need to prepare for it. And third one is the co-benefit, and that is where we need to consider the local communities. It is the, I think Professor also mentioned in the opening remarks, and it is a people-centric approach. That is where Vietnam is when we wanted to aim for a high income. The people-centric approach, the core benefits of the development and the local areas and the governments are important. I stop here. Thank you very much.